Hi, I'm Anna. My life changed drastically 5 years into my marriage with Paul. We were a typical couple. I was a teacher, and he was a manager at an energy company. Everything was going smoothly until his dad passed away, leaving his mom, Elaine, alone in their family home. That's when Paul surprised me with some big news. Anna, we need to talk, Paul said one night, sounding very serious. I stopped scrolling on my phone and looked at him. What's wrong? Is everything okay? He took a deep breath. It's about Mom. She's all alone in that big house since Dad died. I think we should move in with her. I felt my stomach sink. Move in with Elaine? She and I don't get along at all. Paul, are you serious? You know Elaine and I are like oil and water. He leaned against the kitchen counter, looking determined. I know, but she's my mom and she's having a tough time. Plus, we're wasting money on this rented apartment. I sighed, running my hand through my hair. But this is our space, our home. Moving in with your mom is a completely different situation. Paul's voice sounded more desperate. Please, Anna, it's not just about the space. It's about family. Mom needs us. I bit my lip, feeling trapped. Does your mom need us, or do you need your mom? He frowned. That's not fair, Anna. I'm not asking you to live in a bad place. It's a big house, with plenty of room for all of us. I crossed my arms, feeling the tension rise. And what about our life here? Just give everything up because Elaine says so. Paul's tone became firmer. It's not like that, and you know it. I'm thinking about what's best for everyone. I shot back, everyone or just Elaine. He threw his hands up in frustration. Damn it, Anna, can't you just try to see the bigger picture here? I glared at him. I am looking at the bigger picture, Paul. Our life, our independence, not just playing happy families in that gloomy old house of hers. The argument went in circles, but eventually I gave in. For Paul, for the sake of peace. But deep down, I dreaded every bit of it. Moving day came, and it was as uncomfortable as I had imagined. Elaine's house was this big old structure with rooms that echoed and a constant chill in the air. Elaine greeted us with a stiff smile. Welcome to my home. I expect you to respect my ways. I forced a smile, trying to keep the peace. Of course, Elaine, we appreciate you letting us stay. But living with Elaine was like living with a hawk. She had a comment for everything. Don't put the dishes away like that, or you're overwatering the plants. It was relentless. One night, after a particularly harsh critique of my cooking, I exploded to Paul in our room. I can't do anything right for your mother. It's like living with a drill sergeant. Paul rubbed his temples, looking equally frustrated. Anna, just give it time. She's old and set in her ways. I threw my hands up. Great, so we just tiptoe around her until the end of time. He didn't have an answer, and honestly, neither did I. This house, with its constant surveillance and Elaine's scrutinizing eyes, was suffocating. Life at Elaine's house was becoming more challenging by the day. Just when I thought I could manage, Paul dropped another bombshell. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and I was seeking solace in the garden when he approached me. Anna, we need to talk. I looked up, a knot forming in my stomach. What is it now, Paul? He took a deep breath. I think you should quit your job and stay home. We're spending a lot on a nurse and housekeeper for Mom. It would be more practical. I stood up, feeling anger flare up inside me. Quit my job? Paul, I love teaching. It's not just about the money. He ran his hand through his hair, sounding tense. I know, but think about it. It would make things easier here. I shook my head, feeling disbelief. So I just become a full-time maid and nurse? That's not the life I want. Paul's voice rose. It's not about what we want, Anna. It's about what's practical. My mom needs us. I glared at him. No, your mom needs you. I didn't agree to be her caretaker. He shot back. Well, things change, Anna. We need to adjust. That word felt like a slap. I cherished my job, my independence. This wasn't adjusting. This was sacrificing. You know what, Paul? Fine, I'll do it, but don't expect me to be happy about it. He sighed, seeming relieved. Thank you, Anna. It means a lot. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like I was losing a part of myself. Quitting my job was tough, and the days that followed were even tougher. Now I was a full-time housekeeper, nurse, and cook. Elaine, as always, had something to say about everything. One day I snapped. Elaine was criticizing the way I ironed her clothes, and I couldn't take it anymore. Elaine, can you just stop? I'm doing my best here, I said, my voice trembling with frustration. She looked surprised. Well, I'm sorry if I have standards, Anna. I threw the iron down. I'm not your servant, Elaine. I'm your son's wife. I'm here trying to help, and all you do is criticize me. There was a tense silence, and then Elaine's expression softened slightly. I know you're trying, Anna. I'm just used to things being a certain way, Elaine said softly. I sighed, feeling some of the tension ease. I understand, Elaine, but I have my own way of doing things too. From then on, things improved slightly. Elaine toned down her criticisms, and I made efforts to respect her preferences. It was a fragile peace, but better than constant conflict. As time passed in Elaine's house, the atmosphere grew more strained, almost suffocating. Paul became increasingly distant and withdrawn. He was often late from work, and when he was home he seemed to disappear into the spare room as if it were his refuge. One evening, unable to bear the silence and distance any longer, I confronted Paul in the kitchen. "Paul, what's going on with you? You're hardly present, and when you are, it's like you're not even my husband anymore." He avoided eye contact, absent-mindedly stirring his coffee. "Work's a nightmare right now, Anna. Just piles of stress." I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I understand stress, Paul, but it feels like you're shutting me out. You're physically here, but emotionally, you're somewhere else." He sighed heavily, still focused on his coffee. "I don't know what you want me to say, Anna. I'm overwhelmed with everything going on." I wanted to believe him, to empathize, but a part of me felt there was more to his distance. Then there was Lucy, Paul's sister, who seemed determined to add to the tension. Each visit from her felt like a test. She'd look around the house with disdain and comment, "Still stuck in this old place, huh?" I usually held my tongue, but one day her comments hit a nerve. "Not all of us have the luxury of relying on others, Lucy," I retorted. She cackled, her voice grating on my nerves. "Oh, look at you, playing the martyr in this creepy old house. Pathetic." I clenched my jaw, holding back a storm of words. Paul stood by silently, offering no defense. His silence felt like another blow, confirming the growing distance between us. The biggest change came with Elaine. One day she called out to Lucy, her voice frail and desperate. "Lucy, I need help with the bath. I can't manage on my own anymore." Lucy's response was cold and harsh. "Help yourself, Mom. I'm not your caretaker." Elaine broke down in tears, and my heart went out to her. Despite our difficult history, I couldn't ignore her distress. I assisted her with the bath, and something shifted between us that day. Elaine began to warm up to me, treating me less like an outsider and more like a daughter. It was a positive change, but it also highlighted how distant Paul and I had become. The house felt colder, more empty. Despite Elaine's growing warmth towards me, the silence between Paul and me seemed to echo off the walls, widening the gap between us every day. Paul's late nights at work became routine, and our conversations dwindled to mere whispers of what they used to be. During one of these fleeting exchanges, Paul dropped a bombshell. "Anna, I got an apartment near work," he said casually. I nearly dropped the dish I was cleaning. "An apartment? Why would you do that?" He leaned against the doorframe, avoiding my eyes. "It just makes sense, Anna. It saves me the commute, especially with the late hours." Anger and confusion surged through me. "And you decided this without talking to me? Are we just roommates now?" He shrugged, his indifference cutting deep. "I thought you'd be happy. Less stress about me coming home late." I shook my head in disbelief. "Happy, Paul? This feels like you're leading a double life. What's next? You'll tell me you have a second family?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Don't be dramatic, Anna. It's not like that." I wanted to press him further, to break through his nonchalance, but I knew it would be fruitless. The conversation ended there, like many of our conversations those days. The real shock came a few days later during a candid conversation with Elaine. We were in the living room, enjoying a rare moment of calm, when she suddenly said, "You know, Paul didn't buy that apartment with his own money." I looked at her, puzzled. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then continued, "He used my savings. He said it was an investment. He even put it in my name." I felt my heart sink. "He's been using your money, and you're okay with this?" Elaine shrugged, a sad look in her eyes. I couldn't refuse. "He's my son, but I thought you should know." I was speechless. Paul's secret apartment was one thing, but using his mother's savings under the guise of an investment. It felt like the man I married was slipping away, replaced by this stranger with secrets and deception. A few days later, I confronted Paul about it. "Paul, why didn't you tell me the apartment was bought with your mom's money?" He was unapologetic, almost defiant. "Because I knew you'd react like this. It's an investment, Anna. It's not a big deal." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Not a big deal? You're risking your mom's savings and keeping it from me. What else are you hiding?" He turned away, ending the conversation with a dismissive wave. "You wouldn't understand, Anna. It's business." Business. That word felt like a gulf between us, an excuse for everything that was straining our marriage. Living in Elaine's old gloomy house was wearing on me. The walls, once lively, now echoed with a solemn tone, and every creaking floorboard seemed to hold secrets. One day I reached my limit. "Elaine, have you ever considered renovating the house?" I asked during breakfast. "It could use a bit of updating." Elaine looked up from her tea, surprised. "Renovate? I haven't thought about that in years. It's such a big undertaking." I nodded, feeling a surge of optimism. "I know, but it could really brighten things up. Maybe start with a fresh coat of paint or some new wallpaper." Elaine pondered it for a moment. "Well, I suppose it wouldn't hurt to breathe some new life into this old place. But are you sure you're up for it?" I smiled. excited for the opportunity. Absolutely. It'll be a positive change. And so it began. I threw myself into the renovation, painting walls, choosing wallpapers, and even attempting to restore some of the old furniture. It was hard work, but it felt rewarding, like I was breathing new life into the house and, in a way, into myself. One day, while I was busy with paintbrush in hand, Paul walked in. He looked around, his expression one of shock and disbelief. "What in the world, Anna? What are you doing to Mom's house?" I stood up, wiping sweat from my brow. "I'm renovating, Paul. As I told Elaine, it's time this place got some love and attention." Paul's face reddened. "You had no right to start changing things without consulting me. This is our family home, not some DIY project." My temper flared. "Our home? When was the last time you cared about this place, Paul? I'm trying to improve it." He took a step closer, his voice rising. "You're overstepping, Anna. You always take charge and ignore everyone else's feelings." I stared at him, feeling frustrated. "Take charge? Paul, I'm trying to make this place better. Maybe if you spent more time here, you'd understand." Before Paul could respond, Elaine entered the room. "What's all this commotion about?" Paul turned to her. "Mom, did you know about this? About her changing the house?" Elaine glanced between us, then back to Paul. "Yes, I did, and I support Anna's efforts. This house needed a change, and she's doing a wonderful job." Paul looked stunned. "But it's our family home." Elaine interrupted him firmly. "It's my home, Paul, and I want this. Anna has every right to do what she's doing." With anger simmering, Paul stormed out, leaving Elaine and me in an uneasy silence. I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. The house was evolving, yet the rift between Paul and me seemed to widen further. Then came the day Elaine suffered a stroke, flipping our world upside down. I witnessed her sudden decline, her words slurred, her body weakening. Panic gripped me as I called for help, my voice trembling with fear. At the hospital, the harsh reality hit. Elaine required constant care. I turned to Paul for support, but he remained distant, his eyes void of the concern a son would typically have. "Anna, I can't handle this. I have enough on my plate," he said, his tone cold. I was stunned. "You can't handle this, Paul? She's your mother." He shrugged, his words cutting deeply. "Yeah, and she's been a burden for years. This is just the final straw." I couldn't contain my disgust. "She's not a burden, Paul. She's family. She needs us." His laugh was bitter. "Us? No. Anna, she needs you. I've got other things to deal with." I was left speechless, my admiration for him crumbling. I took on the responsibility of caring for Elaine. It was heart-wrenching to see the once strong woman confined to a bed, relying on me for everything. As I became her primary caregiver, Paul's visits became less frequent, and his indifference more pronounced. His visits were brief, his interactions with Elaine superficial. Then Lucy arrived. I overheard them in the living room, their conversation dripping with venom. "We should start discussing the will, dividing up the assets," Lucy said, her tone devoid of any empathy. I burst into the room, fury coursing through me. "How can you be so heartless, talking about her will right in front of her? She's still here." Lucy smirked, her words cutting. "Oh, listen to the saintly daughter-in-law. This is our family's business. Stay out of it." Paul chimed in, his voice cynical. "Anna, just drop it. It's practical to plan ahead. There's no point pretending she's going to recover." I was appalled at their callousness. "Practical? She's your mother, Paul. How can you be so cold-hearted?" He shrugged, his response detached. "Life is tough, Anna. You better get used to it." Turning away, my heart heavy with revulsion, I dedicated myself to Elaine's rehabilitation in the following weeks. To my surprise, she began to show signs of improvement. Her fingers twitched, her speech cleared, and she even managed a few steps. It felt like a miracle to me, but to Paul and Lucy, it was an inconvenience, a roadblock in their pursuit of inheritance. The betrayal cut deep, not just as a daughter-in-law, but as a human being. Life settled into a grim routine. Elaine's health was a roller coaster of small victories overshadowed by the fear of the worst. Then it happened, another stroke, more severe. The call from the hospital felt like a blow to the stomach. Elaine didn't make it. The funeral was solemn. I stood by the grave, heart heavy, watching as people paid their respects. That's when Paul arrived, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize, and two small children holding her hands. "Who's she?" I whispered to myself, staring at the unfamiliar woman. Paul approached, his expression unreadable. "Anna, this is Carol, my wife, and these are our kids." I felt stunned. "Your wife? When did this happen?" He shrugged, his voice cold. "A while ago. It's none of your business, Anna." Speechless, my mind raced. How could he do this, especially during Elaine's illness? Lucy was there too, her usual sneer on her face. "Finally showing your true colors, Anna," she taunted. "A bit late for that." I glared at her, my voice dripping with disdain. I was here for Elaine when you both abandoned her. Don't you dare judge me." Paul interrupted. "Let's just get this over with. We have other matters to discuss." After the funeral, we gathered at Elaine's house for the will reading. Paul and Lucy hovered like vultures, eager for their share. The lawyer began reading the will, and then came the bombshell. Everything, the house, the money, was left to me. Paul's face shifted from smugness to disbelief. "What the hell? This can't be right." Lucy was livid. "This is outrageous. She was our mother. How could she leave everything to this nobody?" I stood there, stunned, unsure how to process it all, relieved, yet hollow. Paul turned to me, his voice accusing. "You must have manipulated her, turned her against us." I shook my head, frustration and hurt in my voice. "I only cared for her, something you failed to do." The lawyer intervened firmly. Elaine's intentions were clearly stated in her will. Lucy stormed out, threatening, "We'll contest this. We won't let her get away with this." As they left, I stood alone in the house that was now legally mine. The walls that had witnessed so much pain, betrayal, and love surrounded me. I looked around, feeling the weight of Elaine's final act of kindness and the sorrow of a fractured family. The house felt different now, as if it echoed Elaine's last wishes and the rift that had torn us apart. I sat there, holding the will, still trying to process everything. Elaine had left everything to me, and Paul and Lucy were furious about it. They stormed in the next day, visibly upset. "You really think you can just take everything?" Paul exploded as soon as he entered. I looked up, weary but firm. "Elaine made her decision, Paul. It was her choice." Lucy was livid, shouting angrily, "You manipulated a sick woman. We won't let you get away with this." I stood up, frustrated with their accusations. "Manipulated? I cared for her, unlike both of you. She chose to leave it to me." Paul's anger boiled over. "So you think you've won? You think you can just snatch it all away from us?" I let out a heavy sigh. "I didn't take anything, Paul. Elaine chose to give it to me because she knew I genuinely cared." Their yelling continued, but it couldn't drown out the truth. I had been there for Elaine when they hadn't. Then the lawyer arrived with a video Elaine had prepared. Her voice filled the room, resolute. "I've left everything to Anna because she was like the daughter I never had. She was there for me when my own children weren't. She deserves it all." The room fell silent. Paul looked stunned, as if hit in the gut, and Lucy began to cry, finally grasping the gravity of their actions. Paul and Lucy left soon after, their threats empty in the face of Elaine's clear wishes. I remained alone in the large house, surrounded by memories of the past and contemplating the future. I made the decision to divorce Paul. It was difficult, but necessary. He and his new family moved to a rental property. Lucy had her own challenges to confront. Her debts and personal troubles were catching up with her. As for me, I stood in my new home, feeling a mix of sadness and excitement. Elaine's will was more than just material possessions. It felt like her way of urging me to be resilient and forge my own path. I resolved to start afresh, using what Elaine had left me to create a new life. The house, once a symbol of hardship, now represented a place of new opportunities and beginnings.